Hi everyone, and welcome to another Gaffer and Gear. So today's episode is for people that own HMIs. So I've got a quick tip for people who have owned HMIs for a long time, something that I stumbled across, a little hack for rejuvenating your globes if they're playing up after you've had a hot restrike not go correctly. And also this episode is more to give advice to younger gaffers, because what is happening a lot at the moment is people like me are changing from HMI to LED technology. We're selling off our HMIs. I've sold 6 HMIs in the last probably 5 months, and younger gaffers coming up are buying those HMIs. So one question I get asked a lot by young gaffers who have bought their first HMIs, and it's really nice to see the excitement, in their faces when they're telling me about their HMI, is, do I need a spare lamp? So we're going to go through why you need a spare lamp, because you can have issues happen with the HMIs, particularly when you're restriking, where the lamp isn't damaged, but it just won't play properly. It just won't come to the party. It'll be the wrong color. It'll be noisy, or it won't start. But the next day it'll start fine. So they're a little bit of a tricky globe, so we'll cover all that. But we'll start off with my hack first. All right, so I just want to point out with this hack, it is for HMI globes that have gone a little bit screwy after a hot restrike. So what it's for is globes that the inside chamber, the arc chamber, the clear inside envelope, that has been painted with mercury. So you've gone to do your hot restrike, and instead of it igniting, the mercury has just gone expanded out and painted that inside chamber completely black. Now, if you're a gaffer and you've been working a while, you know that if you put that globe aside, usually the next day, when the mercury's separated, it'll fire up. But sometimes they don't, like 1 in 4 times I found. No matter how long I wait, the globe just won't restart. So I had a few globes like that, and I was getting to the point where I thought, well, I might as well chuck these out. They're never going to restart. Some of them I've had for 6 months. They're just not going to restart. Now, it just occurred to me out of the blue one day that what I need to do is cool the globe down more. If I cool the globe down more, the mercury will separate and maybe the light will restart. So I got those globes and I put them in the freezer. So you probably think I'm joking, right? You think, Andrew's lost the plot, he's taking the piss here. I put them in the freezer and then took them out a day later, and instead of the inside chamber being coated completely black, there was a little ball of mercury again. Okay, so cooling the globe down, it separated the mercury and separated the elements. And so I let the globe sit on the bench and get back to room temperature. So I just left it for a day to be sure. Put it in the HMIs, press start, and they ran fine. So that saved 2 globes doing that. Then I thought, well, all these other globes that I was going to send to the tip, let's stick them in the freezer and see what happens. So with some of the other globes, after they'd had a hot restrike, they'd gone a screwy color. So some of them had gone green, some of them had gone like a really high Kelvin, like 12,500 Kelvin, like they were purple. And again, I want to point out, this is with globes that they were working perfectly fine. Then I did a hot restrike and they just played up. And these are globes that I kept sitting around the workshop, that they had plenty of time to cool down, days, months, weeks, and they wouldn't go back to correct color temperature. Now, when I put those in the freezer and took those out, I had about a 50-50 hit rate. So overall, I had 6 globes that I was going to take to the tip, take to the recycling centre, put them in the fridge. 4 out of the 6 rejuvenated and came back to perfect working order. That saved me over $1,000, okay? Now, initially I was a bit concerned. I thought maybe it's just mixed the chemicals together or separated the chemicals, and then after about 5 hours of using them on set, the lamp will go screwy again. So what I did is I put those globes into the running stock. So I actually put them in the lamp heads that I used on set, and they ran for a year, over a year. They ran the rest of their life out without an issue. So quick little hack, if you're going to throw your HMI globe in the bin or take it to the recycling centre, put it in the freezer. You've got nothing to lose. Give it a go. It's worked 4 out of 6 times for me. Saved me a lot of money, and I wish I'd figured this out a decade earlier. But look, a quick tip, don't just put it in the freezer. Make sure it's absolutely at room temperature before you go to freeze it so the glass doesn't shatter. So don't take it out of your HMI head, put it in the freezer. Let it sit around for a day or so. Put it in a container just in case it cracks or breaks or shatters, because they've got mercury in them. You don't want mercury all over your food. And then give them plenty of time to get back to room temperature before you chuck it in the lamp head. But for me, it's worked 4 times out of 6 and saved me a fortune. All right, so you've bought your first HMI, you've got a brand new lamp in it, and you're wondering, do you need a spare lamp? Well, the answer is definitely a yes from me. Okay, so there are 3 reasons why you would need a spare lamp or to replace a lamp. Number 1 is the color temperature's gone low on it, or it's starting to get a hue, it's starting to go green. And that happens when they get old, but that's like a long way away, so we don't need to worry about that just yet. The second reason is the lamp could be physically damaged. Okay, so someone's mishandled the lamp. Maybe they've dropped the lamp head and they've physically damaged the lamp itself. So you want to keep a spare lamp just in case you get physical damage. Now that's very unlikely to happen if you're an owner-operator and it's your first HMI. You're going to be treating that thing with utmost respect because you've waited a long time to get it, so you're probably not going to drop it. The third reason is something can go wrong with a hot restrike, and that is the number 1 reason that you need a spare lamp. So there are quite a few things that can go wrong in a hot restrike that don't physically damage the lamp. Like the lamp will work fine again tomorrow, but you might not be able to start it or get it to run properly now. So that's where a spare lamp comes in handy. Now, these issues are not something that happens all the time. Now, I might come across one of these issues where the globe will restart, but it's not running properly. I might come across one of these issues, say, once every 2 years. Okay, but if I didn't have the spare lamp, I would be in a world of poo. Okay, I'd be having to pay for a reshoot. So you definitely want a spare lamp. All right, so to explain the problems that you can have with HMI lamps, we need to talk a little bit about how they work. So first off, we'll talk about what makes them more robust than a quartz halogen. Okay, so when you have a look at a quartz halogen globe, you've got a filament. Now, 9 times out of 10, when you blow a quartz halogen globe, it's the filament's broken. With a HMI, if you have a look at that, there is no filament. So that is one less issue that you have to deal with. Now, the other most common reason that a quartz halogen will have a problem is over voltage, or it gets a power surge or a power spike that blows the filament. Now that won't happen in a HMI because the HMI is not directly plugged into the power. It has a ballast in between which regulates the power it receives. Okay, now to explain some of the problems that you can have with hot restrikes, we need to talk about how the lamp works in the first place. Okay, so you've got 2 electrodes and you've got an arc that goes in between. So let's talk about a soft start or a slow start or a cold start. So you're turning your HMI on for the first time for the day. Let's talk about what happens. Okay, so your ballast in conjunction with your igniter. The igniter is a step-up converter or a step-up transformer that is in the head. The ballast stores a lot of power in capacitors. So we're talking thousands of volts. Okay, so that sends it through to the HMI head where it goes through the igniter pack, which doubles it. So what you end up with is a massive amount of voltage, thousands of volts. Enough volts that the power can jump from one electrode to the other electrode in the globe. Now, that is not what gives you the light. All that does is generate heat. So why do we need heat? Well, inside that arc chamber is mercury. So in this photo here, you can see the mercury splattered on the glass. And here you can see the mercury as a ball bouncing around inside the globe. Now that mercury is our conductor, so that's what allows the power to go from one electrode to the other. Now mercury takes on different forms depending on its temperature. If you super freeze it, it can be a solid. At room temperature, it's a liquid, and it can also be a gas or a vapor. So what that initial arc across the 2 electrodes does is it heats up that mercury so that the mercury vaporizes and becomes a vapor and then allows the electricity to pass between the 2 electrodes. Now, what happens here is as the mercury gets hotter, it conducts more and more electricity. Okay, so that's why when you fire up a HMI initially, it slowly gets brighter and brighter and brighter. And then when it reaches maximum brightness, the ballast changes its job. Okay, the ballast now holds the power back because that mercury is an open conductor. If you just allowed electricity to keep flowing through it, it would draw more and more and more power until the globe explodes. Now let's talk about hot restriking, because that is where you are going to have your lamp issues. The difference between a cold strike and a hot restrike is with a hot restrike, tens of thousands of volts are sent through the globe. Now the problem with sending tens of thousands of volts through a globe is it increases your chance of getting permanent physical damage to the globe. Now here's the thing, it's really easy to avoid this happening. All you do is wait a bit of time. Okay, so the hotter your globe is, the more voltage it requires to jumpstart it. The cooler it gets, the less voltage it requires to jumpstart it. So with my HMIs, I wait 2 to 3 minutes before I do a hot restrike, and that circumnavigates me getting any permanent damage to the globes as a result of the hot restrike, with the exception of 4K pars. I found with 4K pars, I have to wait about 6 minutes to be certain. If you do a hot restrike before then, you really are increasing your chances of permanent damage to your globe. Now let's talk about the permanent damage you can get to a HMI lamp by doing a hot restrike too quickly. And the first one I'd like to talk about is insulator damage. So what I mean by insulator is, in this photo here, you can see a sleeve of glass over this piece of metal. That is an insulator. That's basically making sure that you don't get an arc going through here instead of through the arc chamber. So that's more prevalent on really small globes, so like say a 200 or a 400, and globes that use a substantial amount of voltage to do a hot restrike like a 4K. So if you're restarting those lamps, if you're restarting a lamp that has a glass insulator, don't just press start, turn your back and walk off. When you press start, keep your eye on it, see if it looks like it's doing the job correctly, and listen to it, okay? See if it sounds correct. You will know from those two things, from the look and from the sound, if you've got an arc going through here. Now, if that happens, the globe is a total write-off. You need to stop that light straight away. The next thing, another thing to point out with that is with the arc going through there, wait a really long time before you go to change the globe, because the globe will be cold up here where you touch it with your glove, but down here is going to be unbelievably hot because that's where the arc was happening. So that's just something to watch out for. That is burn you through your gloves hot. Okay, so that's something to be aware of. Now the next bit of permanent damage you can get is to the electrodes themselves. That high voltage can damage the electrodes. So look, a real simple way to get around it is just to wait a few minutes before you do a hot restrike. Now sooner or later, even if you've waited a couple of minutes, you're going to get a bad strike. And when you do, the lamp head makes this crunching sound. It's and nothing happens. So when that happens, don't panic. 9 times out of 10, just wait another minute. So the lamp's cooled down, requires less voltage. Press start and it'll fire up fine. Now, even if you've waited a couple of minutes to avoid permanent damage to your globes, you can have hot restrikes that go bad. So they won't damage the globes permanently, but things don't go to plan. So one thing that can happen is the mercury can expand outwards and it can cake to the outside of the ignition chamber. Now I've tried to get a photo of this, but this is as close as I could get. Now when this happens for real, you can't even see through it. It is jet black, that inside chamber, and it looks like it's burnt. But if you just wait about 3 to 4 hours, usually the mercury will settle down and you can restart the globe. If it doesn't restart by the next day, chuck it in the freezer. Okay, other things that can go wrong is you can have a change in color temperature. So it's working perfectly fine, then you do a hot restrike and suddenly it's like 12,500 Kelvin. It's like super blue. Now when this happens, I found it happens on days where it's 35 degrees Celsius and raining, so hot and humid. Now I don't understand the science of this, but it's just something that seems to happen. So if I'm shooting on a hot and humid day, if I'm doing a scene where I've got to move a HMI from one position to another and do a hot restrike, instead of doing that, I'll leave that HMI there and I'll set up a new head, just because I know it's not worth the hassle of trying to do a hot restrike on those days. Now again, if that happens, if the light goes that sort of ultra blue, I know that it's going to be fine tomorrow, but for the rest of the day, that globe is a write-off. It's not going to operate properly. Other things that can happen: plasma flutter. So the light can be working perfectly fine. You restart it, and then it's sort of shimmering a bit, particularly on the edges of the beam. So what that is, you've got your two electrodes, you've got your arc going in between, and you've got plasma fluttering on top of the arc. The vast majority of the time, the camera can't see this, but that's sort of 1 time in 10 where it can see it. That's when you've got a problem. Now, again, that globe will work perfectly fine tomorrow, but you're going to have problems for the rest of the day, so you're going to need to swap it out. Other things that can happen, oh yes, suddenly you can do a hot restrike and the globe's noisy. So what happens there is, instead of you having a straight arc, the arc is following the path of least resistance, which is all over the place, and it just happens to be making a pattern that, that generates noise. And on a very rare occasion, you'll do a hot restrike and you'll notice that your shadows aren't as sharp. So what's happened there is, instead of having a very small arc, you've got a plasma ball in between the electrodes. That's extremely rare. I've only had that happen about 2 or 3 times. But the thing I find fascinating, I have a set of goggles, welding goggles. So when something goes unusually astray with a restrike, I like to have a look and see what's going on. So it's very rare to see the plasma ball, but that's quite interesting when you see it. It's definitely worth taking a look at, curiosity-wise. Anyway, I think I've covered everything, hopefully persuaded you to have a spare lamp with your HMI. Don't forget to click like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next episode of Gaffer and Gear.